UFC 217, what a card. Bisping versus GSP at the top of the card. There's not much on a Saturday that can get me off of college football from watching college football. This might be it. They're fighting at Madison Square Garden. I believe it should be Center Strip, T-Mobile, Las Vegas for 217, but I digress. Matt, this is a card that is outstanding on paper, and I think it's going to translate into the octagon quite well. Let's start with GSP, your former welterweight champ, who hasn't fought in 4 years, who's going to take on middleweight champ Michael Bisping, who's been taking care of business, fighting really well his last several fights. So with a great fighter like GSP being potentially rusty, matched up against, Bisping, who's been fighting so well, how in the heck do you make a line for this? And right now, Bisping's a short favorite.
And it's gone back and forth, and there's great cases to be made for both guys here. GSP, maybe one of the pound-for-pound greatest in the history of the UFC. But you have to remember, when he left the UFC, it wasn't like he just retired as a dominating champion. The fight that he retired after Johny Hendricks, Johny Hendricks put a beating on GSP that night. GSP then walking away for a little while, and he had a couple of tougher fights before then. His style kind of lended itself to a different time than it does now. It'll be interesting to see if that style is still as dominating now as it was then. And it's also interesting to note that he didn't come back to fight current reigning 175-pound champion Tyron Woodley, who's a really bad matchup for GSP, who has such a wrestling core and base and would have been a nightmare stylistically. He came back and handpicked Michael Bisping. And in this fight, what we have is a Michael Bisping who wasn't even supposed to get a middleweight title shot. Luke Rockhold's opponent ended up pulling out last minute. In steps Michael Bisping to save the pay-per-view card. Luke Rockhold doesn't train, doesn't take him seriously, goes out partying, taking selfies at 2 in the morning the night before. One right hand by Michael Bisping later, new middleweight champion. And since then, Michael Bisping defended the belt once against a 43-year-old Dan Henderson, which taught us nothing, except for the fact that he had to go to a split decision with the 43-year-old Dan Henderson tells us Michael Bisping may not be that great either, and that's probably why GSP picked him to fight here. So you have two guys, Michael Bisping, the perfect heel in this situation, keeps getting in trouble, starts fights at clubs, starts fights at World Series games.
He was just in trouble during the World Series.
I mean, he just starts fights everywhere he goes, running his mouth. He is the perfect antagonist in this. GSP was always the angel white guy coming into this situation. He comes in as the good guy. Bisping's the heel, but don't be played into that heel versus, good guy, bad guy situation here. There's two ways this fight's going to go. Chael Sonnen paved a path on what's an easy way to beat Michael Bisping. Take him down over and over and over again. And Chael Sonnen already did it.
GSP is incredible.
GSP's takedowns are incredible. If GSP, after 4 years away, coming back, stepping up in weight, can take Michael Bisping down, GSP wins the fight. If he can't, Michael Bisping, the bigger guy, the stronger guy, the more active guy, actually, the volume puncher, will probably outstrike GSP through the course of a 5-round decision. So this is your classic striker versus grappler matchup. If GSP could take him down, he probably wins. If Michael Bisping can stuff the takedowns, he probably wins. I personally favor Michael Bisping here. Recent activity, he fought at 205 on the Ultimate Fighter show. So he fought at light heavyweight coming down to middleweight against the guy coming up to middleweight. There's going to be a substantial size differential here. I think Bisping stuffs the takedowns, outlands enough strikes, wins a decision, beats GSP.
If these guys were fighting, if GSP hadn't had this long time off, and he's been fighting this whole time and winning fights, and they both deserve to be going at it on Saturday night against each other. The only real advantage that I see out of Bisping, and this again is throwing out the 4-year layoff of GSP, is strikes landed per minute.
Yes.
When you look at takedown percentage, takedown accuracy, the whole shebang, it's all GSP, but I just can't get over the 4-year layoff because all those stats are 4 years or more older for GSP, and that's scary. I can't wait to see Joanna Jedrzejczyk, a big favorite. I saw like minus 550 at CGT, maybe a little bit higher. Can't wait to see Masvidal Thompson, Dillashaw Garbrandt. I mean, the card just keeps giving over and over. Which of those 3 fights that I just mentioned do you have interest in the most from a betting perspective?
From a betting perspective, for me, it's your Jedrzejczyk versus Rose Namajunas. Rose Namajunas is just so crafty, so creative with her grappling, her striking, that she's so intriguing here that at that price, I'm really interested and letting this line continue to inflate. And I do believe, and as most people, that Joanna Jedrzejczyk is the greatest female mixed martial artist in the history of the sport. Ronda Rousey was the most popular. Joanna Jedrzejczyk is the greatest, hands down. But this is a fight where it's really interesting. We saw her have some trouble with ground specialists. Claudia Gadelha gave her all kinds of trouble for a couple of rounds on the ground. Rose Namajunas isn't just good on the ground. She's special in her submissions and really creative. I think it could be fun. But from a fan's perspective, Cody Garbrandt versus TJ Dillashaw is the fight I have been waiting for forever here. These two hate each other. They legitimately hate each other. They used to train together at Team Alpha Male. Now they absolutely despise each other. Coached opposite each other on an Ultimate Fighter show. I'll never forget Cody Garbrandt snatching up TJ Dillashaw by the neck, and in his description after, rather than apologize, says, "I'm just like an eagle, just snatching him up by the..." I mean, this is going to be a great fight. We haven't seen a meteoric rise since Cody Garbrandt in the MMA, other than maybe Conor McGregor, who had that meteoric rise. But Cody Garbrandt doesn't just beat people, he makes them look really bad in the octagon. This one's going to have fireworks.
Well, listen, I want to tell everybody that we do a podcast on Thursday nights. Matt and I, also Marco D'Angelo, Dave Koken in studio every Thursday night. And the podcast is loaded by Thursday night, early Friday morning. And we're really going to get into detail when it comes to UFC 217. So you'll want to be sure. That's obviously on WagerTalk.com, and it's free to listen to. And we'll really jump into detail on this card. It deserves it. But before we let you get away, give us one fight that you're going to sink your bankroll into, and then we'll discuss the rest of the fights on Thursday night.
I'm playing an underdog here named James Vick. He's on the UFC prelims on FS1, the main event of the UFC prelims on FS1. James Vick versus Joe Duffy. Joe Duffy became famous because he was the last guy to beat Conor McGregor way back when they were both fighting in Cage Warriors, I believe. So Duffy carried this stigma with him. Hey, I'm the guy that beat Conor, because Conor was undefeated in a long time in the UFC until Nate Diaz beat him. And because of that win over Conor, Joe Duffy carried a lot of stigma. But Joe Duffy's not necessarily a big striker. He's more of a submission guy, has pretty good strikes. But what we've seen is every time Joe Duffy steps up in class in the UFC, he gets beat, and gets beat badly. Got dominated by Dustin Poirier, who's a former featherweight, come up to lightweight, had some success at lightweight, but he dominated Joe Duffy. James Vick just looks like a guy he looks like a young cowboy Cerrone, just really tall, long, great striking, unbelievable submissions. His only loss was a fluke one-punch KO loss to Beneil Dariush. He's going to be the bigger guy, stronger guy, younger guy, faster guy, maybe be able to battle Duffy with submissions on the ground. I like James Vick here at about a price of $150 to $160.
Good stuff. And don't forget that UFC 217 talk will be included in the college football Wager Talk podcast, college football Saturday version. All right, that'll do it for Matt Holt. He is Vice President of Business Development at CGT Sportsbooks. Be sure to follow him on Twitter at Matthew Holt VP. Great information on all sports, but especially this weekend on all the goings-on leading up to UFC 217. For Matt, I'm Scott. Stick around, more to come here at Wager Talk TV.